So we can at least start the social. Let's see here. YouTube channel. Come on, let's go back, little buddy. Are you live? And you're live. Good job. Good channel. Come on, let's go. Actually, this usually works better when I do it on my laptop. So let's see here. Oh, that's which I just recently changed my password to. And there it is. There's the good stuff. New tab. Reddit and Twitter and YouTube.
YouTube's on. Get the actual fantasy website going. That'll be nice.
The behind-the-scenes magic that everyone who joins us early gets to be a part of. Nope, that's the wrong thing. Oh, no wonder I'm logged into the completely wrong account on YouTube. That's not going to be good for anything. And live and click and let's get this for anything quieted. Hello, Patrick. Hello, Shannon. Welcome to the beginning of the show, pre-show warm-up. I'm sure everyone is quite familiar with this by now as we're prepping our... No, that's not what I wanted. As we do our little... There we go. That's what I like. There's a certain way I like everything to be before we get the show. But now it's time for social, so if you guys are listening to us, please retweet and share this information when I send it out. So, a little copy and paste going. Copy, link address. Live. Picks. That's right. All right, there is the tweet for anyone who wants to be so kind and share that for us. And the retweet there. Get a quick... Whoa, that is not... I did not expect to see a style sheet. Oh, I'm not logged in under Reddit. Back to the main computer. Back to the main computer. Laptop, you failed me. Periodically logging me out of Reddit. I know, right? It's not... Let's see here. Live
He's trying to help you for your own good. Stay away
right.
from Reddit.
It's trying to give me a little break. Yeah.
Please. Maybe
that would be good. I've done pretty well at limiting my exposure on Reddit. it's much easier than... I mean, I'm doing pretty well with it on Facebook as well, but it's a little bit easier on Reddit to just determine my browsing.
Yeah, that's to me that's one of the nicest features about Reddit is that you can actually turn it off.
Yeah.
You can actually be like, all right, I actually want to go and not deal with politics, or just pretty much everything else. Whatever you follow, they're like, you know what? You really want my political opinion.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for bearing with us as we're getting all of the social. This is just everything that we do to get the promotion going. I see we got 6 people in the channel. Hey, Felix, I sent you a message on Twitter inviting you on the show tonight, and you never responded. Man, you missed your chance. You missed your chance. I guess you could still. You're number 1. Well, then come on the show and talk.
He's just gonna come after the end of the year and be like, after I win it.
Right. He doesn't want to.
I'll give you my tips then.
He doesn't want to share his secrets. That is anti what we're doing here with the movement, though. I guess there's some money on the line, so that's okay. But good. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just a second. A little bit of brown liquor special right here. A little bit of brown liquor special. Not really. You ready to go, Mike?
I am.
You all good? All right. We will get this thing started. Hello, fantasy managers, and welcome to the MLS Fantasy Insider. Tonight, we're going to preview round 9 of the 2020 fantasy season. This episode brought to you by Kickoff Time Changes, MLS's second best-kept secret behind injury news. No, wait. Sorry. No. Actually brought to you by MLSFantasyBoss.com and the amazing Patreon supporters of the MLS Fantasy Insider. You guys are awesome. And a good news, I got the stickers in the mail, so I am finally ready to start sending out this swag after some little delays with COVID and mailing and making sure people could resupply. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I've got all the stuff now, and I'm going to be sending it out, and so it's going to be awesome. I'm your host, Reed Connolly from MLSFantasyBoss.com, and tonight I'm joined by my partner in fantasy, Mr. Michael Denton. How are you tonight, sir?
Doing well. I really liked how last week it was like, we're not going to tell you the kickoff times. I think they could really add a new strategy element of trying to guess which games are actually happening in fantasy. Could really take the game into a whole new level.
Oh yeah, that's how we get the views on social and everything. Like, got to keep hitting that refresh button to find out when the game is. Yeah, we almost had that. I mean, until the schedule drop came. It was just all who knew what was going on. You'll notice that we don't have Blaine with us tonight. He is dealing with a family issue, so we do ask that for those of you who are listening, either now or later, anytime that you're listening to the show, please do keep Blaine and his family in your thoughts and prayers and on your mind as he's dealing with something that, frankly, I mean, Mike and I know what's going on, but we just don't see it as our place to share. Blaine can do that if he so wishes, but just keep Blaine in mind right now. Okay, well, that's some of the things I just wanted to make sure we touch base on. Let's talk fantasy. If you guys hadn't noticed, today I launched a new initiative on Twitter, the just not shortly named initiative of let's get extra time to talk more about MLS Fantasy. If we can do that, let's send them questions right now. We're going to work on an acronym or a more succinct name to go with that. But no, I've been thinking about this for a little bit, and Mike, Blaine, and I have talked about some stuff like this after the show, sort of our like after broadcast chats, and we've talked about this, and I just decided I was gonna do it today, and I am going to do my best to each week send extra time at least one fantasy related question. I'm going to try to do two, one for before each episode, but I'm at least going to try to send one fantasy-related question at the beginning of the week so they could talk about it in either episode of Extra Time when they drop those. This week, I actually, they were mentioning Tinnerholm as a great right back, so definitely check out to listen to that, and I sent in a message at being like, what about fantasy? Top-scoring fantasy defender, and he is cheaper priced than the next 5 top defenders after him, so I tried to throw that in there of do they think that he's worth their pick. And then, of course, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about tonight as well, I also mentioned Higuain, and if after his disappointing start to his career at Miami with that PK, if they thought that he was worth his price for fantasy for this coming week, and if not, who were other forwards who they thought would be better. So I have not listened to this episode of Extra Time yet. I do not know if they talked about those questions or if I even sent them in time, but I did send them over. And so what I'm asking everyone else is let's do this together. Operation Get More Fantasy on Extra Time. Just send over a question once or twice a week, just something general. It could be, how bad is the DC versus Atlanta game going to be? Really fantasy-wise, do I want someone? Anything. Which player should I pick? Is Weeby going to change his roster? Anything, just to see if we can get at least one mention each week about the fantasy game on Extra Time. That's my new initiative, and I hope it takes off. Do you approve, Mike?
I approve of harassing Weeby in whatever form is deemed necessary.
And he's a great sport. I mean, we can get Charlie and Goss in there. I'd love to hear what Charlie has to say about fantasy because, I mean, we know Weeby's track record. David Goss would probably just be focused on all the 21 under 21 on his team, and they would not be successful at all. Ben Bear's doing well. I mean, he's put up some good scores. I still see him in our experts league. But I would love to hear some of Charlie's takes on fantasy. Just being a player, I want to know if he has some insights that he could use to his advantage. I know when we had Bobby Warshaw on that he did talk about how for players it's like this is a job, and so this fantasy loses some of this fun element likely to it because it is what you do. But people play FIFA. Charlie was talking about how people were playing FIFA and talking about their scores, and so maybe he's got some insights about fantasy. So I don't know. I'd love to hear some Charlie's takes on players, even if it's just ridiculousness. Like I was in the locker room with that guy. I would never put him on my fantasy team. He's ridiculous. Something like that. Like I would love any ridiculous thing at all. So let's see if we can do it. Getting more fantasy talk on Extra Time. Hello, everyone who is in chat with us. Hello, Shannon, Felix. Hello, Charles. Hello, Patrick. I know lots of you guys have had some good scores. If you are in chat with us right now, go ahead and share your scores for this past massive double game week. Mike, how did you do?
So I think I did pretty well. 102. So I mean, not one of the barn burners of scores, but pretty good overall. I had Kevin Molino on my team, and he didn't play. Still not quite certain why. It seems like he's picked up some sort of hamstring tightness, maybe. But they ended up working out for me because I had two players on my bench who could come in. I had Bassett, who got 12 points in the first Colorado game, which was really good that he didn't need him in the second Colorado game, which we'll talk about. And then I had Abobasi, who got 7 points. Really, the only disappointment on my team ended up being Valeri, who only got 4 points. Even though LAFC scored bonkers goals, Rossi only got 9 points, which is a little bit surprising considering they got, was it 5 or 6 against Vancouver?
6, yeah.
Yeah. But otherwise, the rest of the team did well. I was lucky enough to have Farrell over Butner, so I was able to take advantage of New England's clean sheet and get 7 points from him. Segura also turned out well. He got an assist in both games. And then my captain, I captained Rossi, so that ended up okay. Quintero had a good second game. Kay did as well. So overall, like pretty much solid scores from everyone all around. I think the only way my team would have been better if I did in fact go with Tinnerholm, as he had a great game against FC Cincinnati, to re-clinch the MLSFI Cup, since I thought we were done playing each other, but somehow we played each other again, so it was back up for grabs, and then we won it again. So
you had no pressure for that one. You were good, no problems. Yeah, I'm looking at some of the scores in chat right now. So far, everyone is sharing scores that are all in the triple digits. Patrick 107, Shannon 114, Graham 106, Charles 110, Felix holding on to his number one spot 126. Excellent scores. Looking over at our experts league, we do have some dead teams, but that's sort of expected because of everything's happening this year. So we're kind of letting some of this slide. But it looks like a lot of people, unless it's Weeby. Oh no, yeah, that's just par for the course for him. I scored 99 points. I had 100 even, which I was super happy about. And then James Ballow and Ben Bear stole a point from me. But rough times. Blaine also got 99. I went ahead and checked out his team. I don't know if he lost a point though with that. My goalkeeper really let me down. I just ran with Luis Robles and did not help at all. I also got bitten by the New England game with Butner in my team. I was planning to switch him out with Farrell, but that didn't happen. But I did have some great luck with Romney. I had some great luck with Bassett. I had Rossi captain. I had Shabilko in there, and I had Tinnerholm on my bench, who came in and brought me those 18 points. So I would have loved to have captained him. He was my highest scoring player. Also had Quintero.
He was the best player of the week. In the dream team, he's a captain.
He is my highest scoring player too, but he was on my bench, taking advantage of what we talked about with Andrew Crawlard a couple weeks ago with some of those boomer bust players. I just wasn't sure. I didn't quite know what might happen with New York. They've had some coaching issues, and they've had some player issues and some injury issues, and they just had issues. But Tinnerholm has not been one of them.
One of the things I think maybe is worth talking about New York City, it's that New York City right now is a defensive first team. All of their struggles have been on the offensive side. Defensively, they've been pretty good about keeping down chances. Toronto, outside of the penalty kick, was not generating a lot of chances against them, and that's even with Pozuelo and Josie Altidore available to them. So I think really for New York City, you're not looking offensively, you're looking at defensively. And that means you're not starting offensive players against them as much. They really seem to have locked it down. Now, that may change a little bit. Alex Ring did get hurt this past week in a litany of injuries for New York City. They've lost Abear for the year. Max Morales is probably out for the rest of the regular season, and we haven't heard about Alex Ring. But Alex Ring has been playing forward. James Sands has been defensive midfielder, and he's been really, really good. He's probably not long for MLS. He's probably got a ticket to Europe waiting for him at some point, probably this offseason, if I had to guess. But so New York City's been really good about limiting chances, and they've been really frustrating fantasy scores for offense players on the other side of the ball. So Tinnerholm is pretty much the best player to pick because he's been rotated a few times. He's gotten those ones which have really dipped his price value down. And he's also probably the best upside as far as maybe getting an assist, maybe getting a goal. So he's really got a lot of value for fantasy players.
Yeah, the dream team that Mike mentioned ended up being a 4-4-2. 173 points was what the dream team scored. Did not check for if it complies with our roster rules, or our budget rules or not. Of course, the other mention out for me, I will say, I also had a letdown from Valeri and Rui Diaz, that red card that got, I think, retroactively applied, I believe. The Disco came in and gave that after the first game, and then Valeri just didn't have as strong performance as I was hoping for. A couple of letdowns for me. Otherwise, not awful. Happy I got out of that 70-point rut that for some reason I was in. So, yeah, 99 points. Based on the Experts League, if you were in that 90-point range, that's probably the average for a lot of people who had strong scores. The Experts League and a lot of the scores I saw just from looking at the top 50 players. If you hit triple digits, you were a little bit above the curve. That's awesome. Triple teens and higher, you did great. You should definitely have seen some rises and some increases in your ranking. I'm top 100. How's your score looking, Mike?
Overall, I'm at I think it was like 234. So I rose 34 points. But I don't think I'm anywhere close to the Champions League, because the Champions qualifier, I'm like 1,058 because last week was so bad. I'm pretty much done as far as the Champions League, but hopefully I'll have a good overall score, because I don't know that I've actually finished top 200 yet overall.
Nice.
So if I can do that, this will be an improvement for me.
Very nice. So let's talk about some quick takeaways. Those of you in chat, go ahead, share your most important fantasy takeaways from this round 8. Mike, what do you have?
Well, I think I kind of talked about New York City. I think that's probably one of the big takeaways that I have, is really setting them as a defense first. Some other takeaways, I think LAFC's inconsistency. They just blew out Vancouver and then got crushed themselves by San Jose. I think we were all kind of thinking that San Jose game was also going to be a good opportunity for them, if not the better opportunity.
For sure.
Considering the way San Jose had been bleeding goals. Molino being hurt, I think, was a big issue. I don't know why that happened, but you know, that's kind of frustrating. I think probably the other big takeaway is Chicago kind of finally pulling it all together. We had talked a little bit about Moran. I didn't go with him. I'm looking at all the people in chat with 110 plus scores, and I think that's one of the players that they had that I didn't.
Yeah.
All of them are pretty good value. They've been putting up very good expected goals, and they were finally able to kind of produce this weekend. They have a pretty good matchup, so I'm sure we'll be talking about them a little bit more in picks. Otherwise, generally, it's more of the same. You need to be on your toes. I'm not sure why they didn't list the kickoff time for the New England Impact match correctly. That was something we just happened to catch on Twitter and be like, oh, hey, and try to put out the all alert on Twitter. But that's really frustrating if you're not paying real close attention to it.
If you're working like me and you get off of work and you're like, all right, let's look at my fantasy team for Final Tinkers. What?
Yeah, I mean that was a big curveball too, because you look at the lineup and see Montreal has basically rotated everybody out, so you really needed two New England defenders. Even though they didn't end up getting the clean sheet, I'm sure everyone looking at that lineup without Tyler wanted New England coverage. So, yeah, I don't know why a little simple thing like that isn't right. It wasn't. Other takeaways: Atlanta is really bad. Like, maybe worse than we thought. But I don't know if that's a new takeaway.
For sure. No, Blaine wanted me to be sure to mention that, yes, Chicago was a big takeaway, and yes, he did mention them last week, and he wanted credit for that, but he did say Zardes didn't do as well as he had hoped. So, yeah, that's my first takeaway as well. If you have not woken up to Chicago yet, you're definitely missing out. They've got a couple of players who are on a good run of form and could be... The value's not as there as it once was because they have been successful over several weeks, and so the prices have risen, but several of them are still pretty good value. And with some good matchups, you could check out that and take advantage of it. Be on the lookout for the New York Red Bulls. They had a couple of 4-point games this weekend, so they have some players who are worth checking out, at least as bench differentials that we've been talking about coming up. So don't sleep on the Red Bulls. Cheap. They have some great value right there with the Red Bulls. If you missed it, Kai Kamaro has left Colorado and headed over to Minnesota. Colorado is going through a COVID outbreak right now, so that'll be interesting to see. I'm sure Kai was tested several times, so with hope that doesn't spread to Minnesota. And a question that was mentioned on Twitter was they were wondering if there could be any spread at San Jose because of this outbreak with Colorado. I'm going to assume that's probably no. I don't know who the players are, so I don't know. But it's mostly been the staff that's had the only two. Last count I saw, my count was 2 players and 10 staff, but I believe the Atlantic said 2 players and 9 staff. So that's what we're looking at there with Colorado. Right. But Kai is in Minnesota.
So Colorado's game was canceled. I don't think they had any impact with Sporting Kansas City. The other COVID situation we had this past weekend was Cincinnati had a player,
Nick Hagland.
Nick Hagland, who disclosed it on Twitter, and he was the one who tested. They let that game go forward. Apparently, everyone else on Cincinnati tested negative, so I'm not sure what the parameters that are different for why Colorado's game was canceled, but Cincinnati. But we haven't heard of a spike of cases in Cincinnati the way we have for Colorado.
Right.
Obviously, that's a situation to keep tabs on. Clearly, the Colorado-Portland game is in jeopardy. As of right now, I would not recommend any players from those teams as a result, but that's on Friday, maybe a very different situation, so we'll have to see. Mm-hmm. But it is worth noting MLS is not disclosing which players they are, and frankly, I haven't seen reporters willing to kind of dig in and disclose that information for them. So that's something you have to find out in lineups anyway. So if Colorado and Portland does happen and you do want to have like a Colorado player like Bassett, for example, that's something you're going to have to take a risk and pay attention to the lineup for.
Sure, yeah. And like Mike said, the reason we know Nick Hagland, it's because he came out and announced it on Twitter. Before then, they had not disclosed. So that's definitely seems to be a personal decision for a lot of the players if they do or don't. Another takeaway I have is clearly after a little bit of brief success, LA Galaxy is on the struggle bus again, and it seems to coincide with Chicharito coming back into the fold.
Yeah, I looked at this for Legit, who I like this week, but it's really tough because his numbers clearly take a dip around week 6, and that week 6 is exactly when Chicharito comes back.
If you hadn't noticed also, Philadelphia has had some starting defenders who have been out injured or unavailable at least the past 2 or 3 games. That they've been putting up some clean sheets even with that, so I think that's just some good reinforcement of how good Philadelphia is fantasy-wise, but you could find some value if you're still looking. Also, the question I have after that goal fest with LAFC, which apparently Rossi didn't take a part of, but is Bradley Wright-Phillips the best LAFC fantasy forward even without the minutes? because it seems like with some of these high-scoring games, I mean, Rossi hasn't gotten a big piece of it, but BWP comes in for 50, 60 minutes and grabs two goals, and there he goes. Um,
BWP may need to be one of your bench players.
yeah.
Just he, I mean, he when we talk about boomer bust players, he absolutely fits the bill, and he just like when he gets it, like he's putting up like double digits.
And then we also have to mention, as Charles has said in chat, is Toronto. There were some questions about Toronto. I don't remember if we had them last week or 2 weeks ago, but we had some questions about Toronto, and we're just talking about they had such a small, limited, not only sample size of games, but it was just the Canadian teams. This week, they came away with 6 points. They had the 1-0 win over New York City FC, and then they had the 3-1 win over Columbus Crew. So that was some very nice results from Toronto. I'm not sure how hard to go in on them next week. We'll talk about that during our player pick section, but great results from the Reds right there. Otherwise, of course, we will mention the big fancy takeaway and a key question that we'll talk about coming up is that PK miss for Higuain. Not the start to the fantasy season, to the season that I think players wanted. So if you did get Higuain for your Inter Miami coverage when he came in, my condolences, because you were definitely at least as unhappy as he was after being taunted by the Philadelphia players. I think that's all I'm seeing in chat. This leads me to one question before we're going to get into the housekeeping. We've touched on this some, but this was specifically asked me on Reddit, so I thought I'd at least review it quickly with Mike. And anybody in chat, you are welcome to chime in on this. I got a question from Old Ham Bread from Reddit, and he said, I would like a serious discussion on the game losing its audience. I've been in a league with over a dozen friends and friends of friends for several years that is now essentially canceled since the salary cap rules make it too daunting. I don't agree, but enough people did. So he likes the rule change. I'll tweak this a little bit. I had another comment sent to me on Reddit, which was fussing about the double game week rules, making it hard for people to maintain interest. That comment was more focused on losing the ability to catch up quickly. Like if you were 50 points down, you can't get a player that just has a bonanza double game week to make up that cap. But the general question, Mike, I'll throw out to you right now is about losing the audience, with my caveat being, is this the right year to even be having this conversation seriously?
Well, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, everything for MLS is much tougher. Even with as critical as I've been for MLS's lack of promotion, it's kind of hard to criticize them for not dumping tons of it with everything else going on socially, and that MLS, is needed to cover. I do think, in general, the biggest part of the audience that has gone over the past few years has generally been the FPL crowd. One, the game shifted away from the system that they knew, and two, the way that the game shifted put more emphasis on lineups that were happening while they were asleep.
That's fair.
So I think most of them stopped playing, and we kind of noticed this in a loss in Reddit traffic, and because a lot of those commenters were also FPL commenters. I don't think that's the only explanation. Clearly, MLS is not promoted as well. We've talked about how there's no social media presence for MLS Fantasy right now. We talked earlier at the top of the show about trying to get mentions on Extra Time. That used to happen a lot more frequently. There used to be videos produced by MLS. None of that is happening. So there's less of a stake in players because they don't feel like they have to have a fantasy part in order to play. I think another part of it too, and we've talked about injury news and all the other things, is that there's more games to keep track of. Whereas the league keeps expanding, there's more things, there's more games you need to watch. When I started, there were how many less teams, like just 4 or 5 years ago, how many new teams are entered into the league. It's a lot easier to keep up then than it is now when we're up to 26 teams. So I think all of that is kind of come into play. I don't know if it's the salary cap rules specifically. I think maybe in a normal year you would see more of an ironing out Right now, it's just kind of so crazy because you're having weird rotations, players kind of coming in. Um, to me, I haven't had too much difficulty with the salary cap. It's mostly I've had to get like one or two maybe cheaper guys as opposed to the ultimate premiums that I would have. But I mean, that's kind of more of a matter of taste. To me, I think more players are struggling with the fact that you need to pay attention in lineups. And as of right now, that's an ask from, all day Saturday, maybe a good chunk of Sunday, maybe night Wednesday. And if you're busy, you can lose it. Um, I would think the double game weeks, even though you can't make so much of a big jump, you also can't fall behind as much. So it's kind of a double edged sword.
Mhm.
But like you said, it's kind of tough to view MLS's numbers on this season. But I do think we can point out they weren't good before COVID. We were looking at a drop before then. And clearly there needs to be some sort of action by MLS. And I don't think it's just a rule change or a format change,
Mhm.
other than like switching it back to FPL in hopes that all those guys return.
Right.
But frankly, there needs to be a lot more investment from MLS if we're going to see the numbers turn around.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, and I think Chad's right too. They're echoing a lot of the same sentiments. And we had the neat mechanic with the Champions League this year. We had some neat promotions with the opening weekend challenge before. They just haven't got a lot of that promotion, and so I think it really is the promotion. Because I know we've had guys from Austin who are already listening to our show, and they're excited about fantasy and playing fantasy. So I think really pushing it with these new expanding markets is an opportunity for the league. I agree. I don't think blaming the salary cap is right. Maybe it is chasing off FPL players, which, I mean, if the focus for MLS is trying to build our fantasy game within our community and our nation for our league, I mean, I get that, and that's just going to happen, and it just has to be seen as acceptable. We're trying to get American fans interested in soccer, in MLS in particular, and we're trying to use fantasy as a vehicle to get them interested in watching a game that's not necessarily their team. And I think that just has to be seen as an inevitable result of focus on that. Because you're right, and I hadn't thought about it specifically that way, Mike, but that time difference is definitely massive and real, and I can really see how that would be a frustration for
Yeah, because I mean, before they just need to have the first lineup, or I mean, they may not even have that, and so that lineup used to drop like 5 o'clock. That's about like midnight over there. So as of right now, it's pushed back a lot later, so it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, but I will also say I don't think this is the best time to start talking about were these changes successful. It's just been so weird, and we've seen it. People in our experts league who are hardcore players who have just had a complete reset in their lives and the reset with this season, and they haven't come back. And I get it. I totally understand that being the reaction, and I hope these people come back next year. And I just think it's not the best time to look at that. The other part of the Discord comment that I got mentioned that the double game week rule was negatively impacting high floor players, so a lot of our defensive mids, people like Chara, somebody like that, who might get 4 or 6 points, and get you an 8, 10, or 12 for a double game week. It would be a very solid player, probably a cheap player that you could put into your lineup, and that he or she was not seeing these players this year because of the double game week rule. And I think that's a valid statement with this rule, but my counter is I think we're seeing different players. I mean, we're seeing some more of these Chicago players before they were a thing. We're seeing some of these New York players that people are taking a flyer on. We're seeing some of these Colorado players that people were taking a flyer on. So I think we're seeing differential players. The boomer bust players are equally being used, and so I think that would be my counter to that statement is we are seeing different players. I think we're seeing more variety for sure. We're having different conversations about the strength of a single game versus the hit or miss of a double game, and even the larger impact of rotation. So I think it's just a different pool of players that's being looked at or being highlighted, and I don't think we'll ever be able to have a system that gives equal viability to all players.
And I'll make 2 comments on that. One, I think the fact that the sheer mass of double game weeks has made it difficult for those players to shine.
Yes.
I mean, when you have 10 teams on a double game week, it's hard to go defense mid. But to me, the problem, the loss for defensive mids on double game week didn't happen with this rule change. It happened with last year's rule change when we went down from 4 players available per team to 3. Because before it was like, oh yeah, we'll easily throw that fourth player, that D mid. If we went to Toronto, for example, easy to get goalkeeper, defender, and maybe if you didn't like one of the forwards, get Michael Bradley and Pozuelo, something like that. Or maybe scrap the defender for Josie Altidore. Now that you're down to 3, it's a lot harder to justify bringing in a player like Michael Bradley, even though he's going to get you a high floor. You generally want to have those high point potentials because you figure if you can hit it on one, you'll make up more than what Michael Bradley did. So I think those defensive midfielders really shown in a 4-player system. I didn't mind that rule change because I thought we did see a little bit more diversity. It was harder to pick which of the 3 players you wanted. So, yeah, and we've talked about how to get defensive midfielders. And honestly, at this point, with more and more teams, it's going to be harder and harder to justify picking defensive midfielders. And I don't know that there's a point system out there that's really going to justify taking defensive mids unless you basically force players to pick defensive mids.
Yeah, and Patrick makes a good comment that these changes were really focused on getting rid of template teams, which I think they've been excellent at doing. The salary cap and the increasing cost of players definitely makes for hard decisions. I know especially the last 2 or 3 weeks I've been faced with hard decisions of who I did and didn't want. It makes you look at some more of the value players. We're still getting value players, so I personally feel that the shift, because I view it as a shift of which players are going to be your differentials, your D mids versus some boomer bust guys, is a much more acceptable reality than template teams. Because I get it. That is definitely a bummer when everyone's going to have the same players and you may have one different person. It might come down to your captain. But I think fixing template teams was the better decision because that's been a complaint that a lot of people have had for a lot of years. So, Old Handbread, I hope that was serious enough for you. We'll definitely have a conversation like this again at the end of the season. We'll try to bring James Ballo or Ben Baer or both on to have that conversation, and we'll try to work up a survey or something. I know that James is definitely very interested in getting feedback from the community, so they definitely want to hear these comments, and I look forward to having some more of those discussions in the future. But now, let's talk about housekeeping for round 9. Before we do that, any other final thoughts, Mike or chat, for any takeaways from round 8?
Nothing for me.
All right. Hearing none, motion to move to the housekeeping. Seconded by me. Okay. So, round 9. Wow. I just took it over. Seconded by Blaine. So last week we had the show air before the schedule update came out, and so now we have all the rest of the schedule filled in. And I thought round 9 could potentially start on Wednesday. I am so happy to be wrong. Round 9 is a regular week. There are no midweek games at this time. There are no midweek games listed for round 9. Round 9 starts on Saturday, October the 3rd. That's right. We have a whole week to think about this. Round 10, though, is a quick turnaround, so go ahead and start thinking about round 10. That starts on Tuesday, October 6th. So we just have a few days in there. Saturday and Sunday is what round 9 is, and then on Tuesday, games start back up. Another big double game week. But this week, nobody is on a double game week, and also nobody is on a bye week. Or are they? As Mike mentioned at the beginning of the show, there is a very good chance that Portland and Colorado's game could be canceled. Keep an eye on that, because if that does happen, then you will definitely want Portland and Colorado players on your team as the guaranteed players who will not be playing, because they will be on, I don't know if we're even calling them bye teams anymore, just cancel teams or whatever, but their players definitely won't play, and they would be excellent options if you're going for any kind of Aru for round 9. Other updates, if you check the Disco report, you can see there are a whole slew of players, a whole mess of players, who have 4 yellow cards and are very close to having a yellow card suspension for a game. So I have that loaded up, but feel free to check it out. It's the MLS disciplinary summary if you want to to look that up. I mean, we've got Calvo from Chicago, who's been putting up some good numbers. Figueroa from Houston, who's also been putting up some good numbers. Memo Rodriguez is on there. LGP from Miami is on there. Going through here real quick. Justin Glad from RSL putting up some good numbers right there. Those are some of the players that jump out right now. All of those guys are on 4 cautions, and most of them have 2 to 4 games left before they get a good behavior incentive. So keep an eye on that. Yellow cards could be an impact in round 9 for who is available for you in round 10. Mike, any injury news or updates or anything else to add to that?
Abear officially sustained an ACL injury in the TFC match. He is out for the season. Alex Ring came off early, and then Maxi Morales is probably going to be out for most of the rest of the regular season, if not the entire regular season. Also, just kind of a note: MLS did officially announce the rest of the season and the changes in the playoff structure. So it is 10 teams from the East, 8 teams from the West who will be making the playoffs. So that is now official, which I don't believe was official before. So that'll be something to keep in mind, is because pretty much everyone is still technically in it.
And also the injury report was last updated on September 28th. If you want to check that out for MLS, they have every team with the various injuries there. I will also point out, again, mention it at the top of the show, Rui Diaz got a red card for the second game of Seattle this week. So if you were wondering why he was not there, that is why. It's not some sort of injury or lingering issue. So if you're thinking about having Jordan Morse or Will Bruin on your team because you think Rui Diaz may be out for some sort of strange reason, some sort of because MLS reason, he will be available. So just not saying pick him. I'm just saying that's part of your thought process for this week. If nothing else from chat, we will move on to our player picks for round 9. Blaine has been so nice as to provide me with a graphic of what his team currently is. He clearly did not see the news about Portland, Colorado, because he does have a Portland player on his team, but we will taunt him about that throughout this entire week and mention it when we get to the relevant section. So, Mike, let's start out with keepers and defenders, and I will start with Blaine's pick since he usually goes first here. Blaine is going with a keeperoo, and he is going with... so I thought about going with a keeperoo involving DC. He has Bill Hamid on his bench. I haven't decided if I'm brave enough or not to do that because DC and Atlanta are both terrible bad. And I don't know if that's going to make this a 0-0 snooze fest. I don't know if somehow DC with maybe the better Higuain will do better this week, or if Atlanta will be able to be better than DC. I don't know. There's just so much about this game that I am unsure about. But Bill Hamid is only 5.3. DC is at home. If you're going to do a keeperoo, that's probably your best option right there. Or if you're looking at the Orlando-New York game, which starts earlier, Galice is a 8.1, 8.4, something like that. He's an 8 million keeper, which is a bit expensive for my taste for a keeperoo. And Orlando's been able to put some goals up. New York has this recent result that they've had, so I'm not very confident about that one. But he has Bill Hamid on the bench, which means he is looking at one of these later 10 o'clock games for his second keeper, and he has Stephen Fry for Seattle versus the Vancouver Whitecaps. I like that pick. I think that's a solid keeperoo, probably the best keeperoo option, because you're really looking at either the Seattle-Vancouver game or the San Jose-LA Galaxy game. And I equally don't trust the San Jose-LA Galaxy game as much as I don't trust the DC-Atlanta game. So I get where he's going. But that's what Blaine's looking at right there. Stephen Fry is 7.6, so not too bad for sharing between there. Then for his defenders, he has Birnbaum for the DC-Atlanta game. He is 5.7, so he's really banking on that clean sheet for DC. Kind of surprised I might have started a DC player on my bench if I was going to go with this keeperoo to try to save some to face there. He has Kalman on his bench, or sorry, Kalman on the field for Minnesota, 5 million. He has Bornstein for Chicago in the field with 4.5, and then he has Romero from Toronto, 4 million, and Reyes from Inter Miami, 4 million on his field as two of his switcheroo options right there. So he is looking at a 3-man back line. He's just set with Birnbaum, Kalman, and Bornstein as being his defenders, and that's where all of his switcheroos are coming from there. What do you think of those, Mike?
Oh, I think they're really interesting. I have some similar picks. My keeperoo is actually a little bit different. So I'm okay with Galice's price point. So I have him as the first game because that's a 3:00 kickoff. It's like 3 hours before everyone else. I know Red Bulls have been very good the last 2 weeks, but the competition has been pretty bad too. So I don't know how much of that is just noise. I'm willing to bet that Orlando, especially Orlando at home, can keep a clean sheet. But if not, I have St. Clair from Minnesota. We've talked about Cincinnati's struggles to score, so I think Minnesota is a really good option defensively. And that's why I also have Metnair at 7 million against Cincinnati. So kind of putting some eggs in that basket. Right now, also kind of with Orlando, New York Red Bulls, I have Smith. He's 4 million, but he's been starting recently. So I think it's a pretty cheap ticket into the clean sheet. Also for DC United, I have I didn't go with Birnbaum. I went cheaper with Mora. He also seems to be starting consistently, but this is putting a lot of onus on me to check lineups. And then on the bench, I have Farrell. He's 7.5, so he's a little bit more expensive now, but New England has been pretty stout defensively, and Nashville is not the most consistent offensive team. So.
No, indeed not. Indeed not. No, I like those picks. You're definitely right that I think if you go with a keeperoo, going with Orlando, New York gives you the most flexibility because you still have every other game to pick from. So that's a nice one to look at right there. For me, as I said, I wasn't quite sure about this DC game, wasn't quite sure about this Orlando game. So I decided to only go with one keeper again. This also has the added benefit of just letting me save some cash as to where I'm going to shift that money to. So I am looking right now at Turner from New England. I do like that shot. Nashville has not been the greatest scoring team on the road. New England's pretty average at home, but they're in that sort of upper third section of average. So I like that matchup there. And then I have Kessler on my field also from New England. He was a little bit cheaper than Farrell. That's what I was looking at. He's been playing as well. Mostly I'm just clean sheet hunting here. I mean, he's not gotten any big points except for the clean sheet, so this is kind of a clean sheet hunting here, doubling up on New England. And that's usually what I do. If a lot of you all may do this who listen, but usually I'm going to double up with my style. I double up at least one defender with my keeper. And if I'm doing a keeper, sometimes I'll have one defender matching each keeper just so I can try to double up on a clean sheet if they do get that. Some people I know like to just have a variety, but this is just how I approach it, is I always try to double up. The next two options that I have, I went super cheap with my defense right here, and this may be what people, this may be some of the boomer bust players that we're looking at right now. I went with Tolo for Seattle. He's 4.2. He's been starting on the left wing. Seattle did just get Roman Torres back. We forgot to mention that earlier. Roman Torres traded from Miami. He is a central defender, so I doubt that would displace Tolo. It might be one of the center defender guys who are going to be displaced, but at 4.2, I really like Tolo. He's not been playing every game, so he's definitely one that I need to keep an eye on. Tolo has been playing every game. It's my next defender that's not been playing every game. Tolo seems pretty good, 4.2. My next defender is from Minnesota, Dibisi, and he is 5.8. He has not been playing every game. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself in my notes. But he did start last week against RSL, played the full 90 minutes. The week before that, he played 45 at Houston, then he played 90 at Sporting Kansas City. So I think he might be good for Sporting Kansas City, and he's 5.8, so that's a great value. Patrick in chat mentions that Brad Smith, who is 4.5, might be starting in case of Tolo, which is totally fine with me. I'm happy to have me some Brad Smith, and I have the room in my budget for a 0.3 increase in a left back. So if it's Tolo or Brad Smith, I'm looking for that real cheap back this week. I've seen several teams on Reddit and on Twitter and on Discord have been posting like heavy defensive teams, 4 players, 5 players, and with seeing some of the results from the past Dream Team the last couple of weeks with these 4-4-2s that we've seen, I get it. I just look at the lineup of games this week, and I don't have lots of stuff screaming clean sheet at me. Looking at some of the stats, a lot of the players who are on the road have had some decent success at scoring. A lot of the players who are at home have only had some okay success at clean sheets, and even some of the players who have had good success at home, like Toronto has a pretty strong home record, they're playing against Philadelphia. So they're playing these strong teams that just make me concerned that a goal might get through. And if I'm kind of clean sheet hunting,
and that's a game in Hartford too. So it's
right,
like one of those
exactly,
weird home
right,
games.
right. It's hardly any distance from Philadelphia. So I'm concerned this week about clean sheets being plentiful. So I'm trying to clean sheet hunt on the cheap right now and put most of my money in the attack.
And I think defenders have been benefiting from the double game week structure that we've had, because you give defenders 2 shots at a clean sheet.
Yeah.
And if you can identify the defenders with 2 decent shots, generally you're going to hit one or the other. It's a lot harder in a week like this where you're just single game weeks. I mean, DC Atlanta is a perfect example. On paper, neither of those teams can score, and it's 0-0. But we've been doing this long enough to know, because MLS, that's probably a 3-3 game.
right. Shannon asked about Seattle Vancouver game, and I'm okay with it. I plan on having a Seattle player, Shannon. Vancouver has been surprising some this year. They've been able to get some sort of an offense together at times. Seattle's got an experienced team. If Torres comes back, I think that boosts their defense and could be helpful. He's coming back to Seattle, so this isn't a situation where you're bringing in somebody completely new that's not going to be familiar with these players. These guys know him. He knows them. So I think if they bring Torres back, that it could really help boost the team on defense. And I like their shot. I mean, Vancouver, while they've been surprising, still aren't stellar. So I think Seattle's got a decent shot. I mean, I think they've got a better shot than some other teams. So I'm good to roll with Seattle. Someone I didn't include was anybody from Atlanta or DC on my team, and that's again because I don't know about those names. I also thought about Calvo from Chicago, but again, Montreal has had some success, and Tyler didn't play at all last week. And with that, we're going to transition into midfielders. Mike, who do you got?
All right, so I have Nicholas Ladero. I think I've come back around that he's been okay fantasy-wise, because he's been really good fantasy-wise. He's 14.7, and he's earned that price. There's been some concerns about whether or not Paulo has overtaken him. Whether or not on-field discussion is relevant to me, Ladero still producing fantasy-wise, so he's got to be on my team. Even though I don't love the Seattle-Vancouver matchup, Vancouver's just kind of struggled. There's just so much upside there, even though I feel like there's a risk because somehow Vancouver always tends to mess with Seattle in that game.
Cascadia,
I have from Cascadia Cup. Herbers from Chicago. They've kind of finally put it together. He's been really good recently, so I've got him. I have on my bench Sebastian Lletget. He's been putting up okay numbers, but again, he's taken a huge hit from Chicharito, which is why he's on my bench. But they're playing against San Jose. And I know San Jose's gotten some decent results, including a win against the LA Galaxy in recent weeks, but I just don't trust that team, so I have him on the bench because I think there's an opportunity there. And basically my plan is if he does really well, then maybe I'll swap out Rusnak. I have Rusnak on the field because LASC has been really struggling defensively, so I think Rusnak at home is pretty much as solid as a pick as we've had the past few years as possible, especially with LAFC struggles. And then I have Quintero. Blaine has talked a lot about Sporting Kansas City struggling with fast pace behind the wings. Houston's given Sporting Kansas City trouble already. And Quintero, he has a blip every now and then, but he's been pretty consistent. And he's only 9.2, I believe. Yeah, 9.2. So he frees up some money elsewhere. So I've got him on my squad.
Okay, Blaine agrees with you, Mike. He also has Nicolas Ladero on his team. He's just so expensive, $14.7 million. I mean, looking at his numbers, Paolo was scoring higher this week. I think 9 versus 8, but Ladero is still getting those shots, and he of course is on those PKs. So Nicolas Ladero 14.7. Blaine also has Nani for 9.5. Interesting pick right there. Nani's a good one. Mueller's another one I know people talk about who sort of comes and goes. Both of those probably become those differential players for me. But Blaine's going with Nani. He has Memo Rodriguez, 7.4 on there, going for a little bit cheaper. Still some good quality. Then he has Diego Valeri on his team right now, which we know is probably clearly a mistake because that game has a very high chance of being canceled. On his bench, he also has Herbers. Haven't had to pronounce that name for a little while, so don't know about that one. But Blaine says clearly he is the better midfield option. When, of course, if you're looking at midfielders from Chicago, you can see that Madron has a higher total score. I think he got more points last week as well. They've also had some very good results from Jimenez and also from Mikhailovic. But I think we've all been looking at Herbers because he's had a great run of form right now. So there's some consistency there that a lot of us like. And he's 10.1, a little bit cheaper than some of these other guys as well. So he's a good value, and I agree that's a great pickup for this week. For me, I have also have Herbers. I think he's a great option. I have Paolo right here because it's pure price. Like he's 11.7. It's really messing with me trying to get that 14, almost 15 million player into my lineup at this time because of some other places I want to spend at. I'd have to cut back on my forwards to do that, which I may. Another place I may cut back is I have Taider in my team right now. He did not play either game last week. I was searching for some injury news about him. I couldn't find it, and Charles is sharing with us right now in chat that he has a muscle injury. So that may be a quick shift that I make away from Taider, and that would likely free up money for me to go to Ladero, which I would like if I could afford him. I would probably look at Quintero as another option. That price point makes it easy to free up some money, and he has success against Sporting Kansas City. He got an assist the last time they played each other. I don't remember who got the goal. Of course, the problem is what's the impact of Elise being gone from them right now. But I still do like that pick. My other pick for midfielder that I have on my bench is Royer. I like him as sort of a boomer bust player this week against Orlando. He's 9.7. I think he's a pretty good shot. He was pretty active last week, involved in both of those 4 goals scored for New York. So he tends to be the player I've liked most anyway. I know a lot of people have looked at Kaku as well, but I've always liked Royer as one of my go-to New York players. I think he's been a bit more consistent, and he doesn't kick balls in people's faces. So there's that as well. I'm not seeing anything else from chat, just the Taider news. So that's one to keep an eye on. If you do want to take a flyer on Montreal, you can do that. I mean, they're going to be 7:30 before they play, so you will have time to see that lineup before you shift. I mean, you could look at a Toronto option. You could easily switch over to Quintero if you wanted to go with that. But I was looking at Taider mostly because of the rest that I thought he might have because of this. So because he's been playing a couple of double game weeks in a row, and I thought maybe they just gave him the week off. Who knows? Then a muscle injury because MLS. I tried very hard. Let's move on to forwards. Chat, go ahead and share who you were looking at. I thought forwards was really fun this week, picking through the forwards. It's been frustrating before, but it's fun this time. Blaine, of course. Come on. There we go. Blaine, of course, went with his man, Gyasi Zardes, on his bench, 10.8 million for that Dallas Columbus game. Could be kind of tough. I don't know. Dallas has gotten some clean sheets this last few weeks. That could be a tough game for Columbus, especially missing Zellerion. He also has Jordan Morris on his bench, 12.7. I don't know if this is because he thought that Rui Diaz would not be available or because he thinks Morris will do well. Morris got a goal and an assist last week, and the thing about Morris is he tends to do really well one week and then goes 2 weeks with not a very big score, then does really well again. So I kind of don't know if I want to go with Morris right after he did really well right there. But he has Jordan Morris. And then his third player, the only player that he has on his field right now for forward is Barrick from Chicago, 10.4 on a great run of form with goals and assists. He might be one that's in a lot of teams this week with even with an away game to Montreal. Mike, who are you looking at?
So I'm looking at two of the same players that Blaine is, and then I have kind of a cheap wild card to kind of play with in there. I have Jossie Zardes on the bench. I'm kind of worried about Columbus's inconsistency and Dallas's. I don't want us to say run of good form, but they're definitely tightening up defensively from what we saw when they were first giving up goals to Nashville. I have Jordan Morris right now. He's kind of the high upside against Vancouver. Obviously, that's a boomer bust. And then I have Corey Baird on the field. And a lot of that is because he's 4.2, and I can easily kind of scrub him out if necessary, mostly if Zardes or Farrell or some of the other players do well, and I want to bring in some additional players. But also, he is very much a boomer bust guy. When he does well, it's 10 points. So to kind of have him on there just to kind of see what happens, and I have a little bit of money in the bank to play with it, kind of depending on what else happens. So it's kind of a weird pick because he hasn't been starting consistently, but when he does do well, he does really well. And it's mostly a statement of how little confidence I have in LAFC's defense.
Ouch. For me, I also have Barrick. I thought that was a pretty good shout against Montreal this week. They've not been the best at home, so I like that option. I have Jordan Morris right now. I'm not sure about that one. I've gone back and forth with Rui Diaz. What I love about this week with forwards is I think you can make some good arguments for a lot of players, which with the last few weeks we've just been like, oh my God, who do I want? There's such horrible options with forwards. But I think there's a lot of good value this week. I also have Bo on the field right now. I like that matchup against Nashville. They've also not been great defensively on the road, and with Fagundes getting a bit more involved, and with Lee Wynn back helping with some of the creativity, I think that's been good for Bo. So I like Bo. 9.9, pretty good value. Seen some comments in chat. Kai Kamara is one I think could be definitely an option that you look at with Minnesota going up against Cincinnati. That big body of Kai Kamara could really mess up with what Cincinnati is trying to do defensively. The comments, we saw the big beatdown they had against New York last week, and when Jaap Stam came back, he pretty much called out the fans when he had the press conference about that, and he said, this is what happens when we try to go forward and go like that. So I don't think he feels like he has the team that can do that. I think he feels like he has to have this team that plays defensively and goes on the reactions, which is fair because he didn't build this team. So I don't know if we'll see that kind of goal fest from Cincinnati this week like we saw against them last week, because they may go back to some more of that defense first style, especially after that press conference. Maybe it was just smoke and mirrors, but that's what he said, and that's what I'm going with. But I can really see a good argument for Kai Kamara this week. People mentioning Jordan Morris, I totally get that one as well being talked about. Shannon mentioned Barlow from the Red Bulls as a bench option. He's $4 million. He got 2 goals last week. Yep. The definition of a boom and bust player. I don't have him. My worry with him is that it may not give you some great options to move around with. I mean, that's a $4 million player right there. If you spend a lot of your money on other positions, will you have enough money to get a quality backup if you don't want to go with him? But he's $4 million. I mean, if you're not planning on running 3-4, I think there's 3 good forwards, and that's why I worry about just using a $4 million shot like that.
I think if you're using him, I think he's on your bench because that's the first
Has to,
game,
yeah.
so you can kind of really adjust and you don't lose too much. But yeah, I think Reed is right. It depends on what other forwards you see, and really where you want to spend your money. I mean, you have to kind of sacrifice some value somewhere. I did it a little bit at forward, or at least on my third forward, and then mostly on the defensive line and splurged on midfielders. So it depends on where you want to sacrifice.
Yeah, other forwards you might look at. I mean, you could take a look at Toronto, of course, and see who they might start up on top. Philadelphia has been pretty good defensively, so I would kind of worry about that. I'd rather go with someone like Pozuelo if you're going to go with a Toronto player. But I mean, you could get lucky seeing who's starting up. Same thing though, if you're looking at like Shibilko for Philly, I kind of worry about that pick because Toronto has been pretty good as well. Charles mentions Manotas is 5.1. That's another good option over there with Houston. And of course, we have to mention the elephant in the room. The PK skying elephant in the room. Higuain over at Inter Miami, 9. Let's see, he came in at 9.5. I did not check his.
Still 9.5.
He's still 9.5. So he came in at 9.5, still 9.5. Mike, are you tempted by Inter Miami's Higuain? I'm assuming no after what you were talking about with New York's defense first. They play New York City FC this week. 9.5 Higuain, pass or play?
To me, it's pass. We talked about New York City's defense. Higuain still meeting his teammates. I think it was kind of surprising that Higuain started so early for them. But, I mean, like we said, they're trying to make the playoffs. And they have a decent shot to do so, so they're trying to get as much as they can. To me, I want to see something more out of him. I mean, he would have been 4 points without the PK miss. That's not amazing. There's just so many good midfield options right now. It's hard for me to justify that at this price right now. And the matchup's just not good enough. I mean, that's not to say that he can't go off. It's possible. We haven't seen it yet in MLS. And I kind of want to see that. And I suspect when we do see it, it's not going to be against a defense-first team like New York City.
But he still had 5 shots last week, so I mean, he definitely has the potential to have a big goal fest. Philly, not the easiest team to start out with. It was pointed out in chat, Mike, that we forgot to specifically talk about clean sheets. So before we hit our boomer bust players, I know we've mentioned our defenders, but do you want to mention real quick just who you think has good clean sheet shots?
Yeah, Minnesota and Orlando, I think, are good. We talked about the DC Atlanta game as one of those either 0-0 or 3-3 games. Maybe some other New England. We talked about Seattle. Maybe FC Dallas. But we'll have to see. Probably depends on if Columbus starts Zilla Ryan.
Yeah. No, again, like I said before, I'm not sure about clean sheets this week. I think you're right, Mike. I think Seattle's got a good shot. I think Minnesota's got a good shot. New England have a good shot. I'm not sure about DC Atlanta. Again, I could see that being 0-0 or, like you said, 3-3. Who knows? And I'm still worried about Orlando, New York Red Bulls, but I totally see where you're coming from with liking Orlando. So, sorry, chat. Those are the specific clean sheet call-outs. And thank you for pointing that out. Let's go to boom or bust players. Blaine didn't send any over for this. I've already mentioned a couple during my picks. One of them, of course, is Royer. One I didn't mention that I'm going to say right now is Figueroa at defense. 10.2 for Houston. He's the second highest scoring defender in the game. Been racking up a massive amount of bonus points. Going against Sporting Kansas City, which has not been amazing this year. So I think Figueroa's got a shot at a clean sheet, but it's not enough for me to be really banking on it. But with how he's been putting up bonus points, I could see him still having a decent score this week, and so I have him on my bench as a boomer bust player. I got a few more, Mike, but I want to give you a chance to add anybody before I just start rattling them off.
We've talked about Jordan Morris. I think is boomer bust. I think Leggett is probably a boomer bust player with the inconsistency with Chicharito. I have Baird. I'm almost kind of wondering if Chelsea Zardes is moving into that category of boomer bust.
I can see that. Without Zella Rayon.
Yeah, because he's not putting up as many bonus points. I mean, he's getting the goals, which is why he's still maintaining
Yeah.
fantasy relevant. But he's really easily booming or busting. So I think those are mine.
I think you might even add Shabilko to that list. This just because of the stronger Toronto defense. That maybe Shabilko or Aronson might be a boomer bust this week, because this might be a tougher game. Maybe not as high on your list. I would probably put Rusnak. You had mentioned him, Mike. He would probably be a boomer bust player for me just because of LAFC. And then we mentioned before, Bradley Wright Phillips, I think, is an amazing boomer bust option if you want to run two. I've seen several teams with Rossi as their only forward. I don't know if that's necessarily the best play this week. I can see betting against RSL. They've had some success, though, so they're not as bad. And it's a late game. I think there's some other decent shots for goals. And he's not been a big part of some of these goal fests that they've had. It's been more Bradley Wright Phillips. So BWP may be the better shot. So that's an interesting development that we've had, because it's been his minutes that have really... I mean, they've scared me. I mean, I'm looking at this guy. Can I really get a player and be like, yeah, I'm okay if you only play 54 minutes. That's cool. And I mean, if he keeps putting up 2 goals each time he does it, then yeah, that is cool. Heck, even getting 1 goal for 54 minutes isn't bad if they're coming off like that. So it's an interesting option that I'm warming up to. All right, let's wrap this up, Mike, with captains. Who do you have?
Right now, I have it on Ladero. He's been really consistent as far as production. So I'm probably cursing Seattle with this pick, but that's what I have it on.
Blaine agrees with you. He also has it on Ladero. I do not have Ladero in my team. So right now, I put this on the captain on Bo, which is not something I'm super comfortable with, because, as I said before, I don't really like putting the captain on my forwards, because I tend to like the bonus point options of the midfielders more. However, if I do some readjusting, like if I take Tider out and go with a Quintero, I will probably switch Paolo to Ladero, in which case that will be a decision I will definitely make. But I like the Ladero as a pick. Bo is tempting for me if you're not considering Ladero or can't afford him. I think he has some good upside against Nashville right there. Chad, if you guys have any suggestions for other players, go for it. I mean, someone from Chicago might be a very daring player right now. That could be very interesting. I would not recommend captaining a defender, even though we saw Tinnerholm do amazing last week. That is also something that I may have done it once in all these years, but that's not something I'm usually as brave
Generally
for.
Doesn't work out, especially in this game.
No, it does not. It generally does not. So that's what I have for the captain. That's who Blaine has and Mike have. That is all that we have for our player picks right now. Chat, do you all have any final questions as we start wrapping up? Let's see here. Looking over here. See, Patrick has his captain on Jordan Morris. That's an interesting one, since I do really agree he's more of a differential player, boomer bust player. It'd be tough for me to put a captain on him. Javier is asking about Pavone at captain, only because it's San Jose, and I think LA Galaxy looks to break the dry goals. That's a lot of faith. I don't know. That Chicharito element really makes me wary of giving Pavone a spot, and I mean giving any LA players spots in my team, and especially giving them a captain. That I guess I'll just say it. I don't like LA Galaxy with Chicharito. I think it's just been a very disrupting season for them. Not just what's been going on nationally, but I don't really think he settled well. The comment I saw on Twitter was that's what happens when you draft players just to sell jerseys. And I don't know. If they bench Chicharito, I'll look at LA Galaxy. Probably. Yeah. I mean, I think that does boost the value of Leggett. That boosts the value of Pavone. Clearly, those two players are go-to targets for me when Chicharito's not there right now.
And Pavone has only scored above 3 points once since Chicharito came back.
Yeah, he was great while he was gone.
It's just been 2s and 3s. He got an assist last week. That's it.
And I've not really been watching those LA games, so I haven't broken down how they're playing with him and how that looks. I haven't looked at the video. I've just not been looking at LA because of just some of this rough form that they've been on. And it's been kind of busy with the baby on the way, so haven't gotten to watch as much soccer as I wanted to at times, so I have to do some replays and read some articles. But and the stats. We're looking at the stats, too. We do all those good things. But, yeah. I don't see anything else. So, Mike, anything that you want to say for wrapping us up?
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to us tonight. Again, if you came in late for the live stream, or if you just missed this for some reason at the top of the show, please do keep Blaine and his family in your mind. He's dealing with some stuff. So thoughts and prayers for Blaine right now with what he's dealing with. With hope, he'll be back next week. Don't forget, the games start on Saturday this week, so there's no need to rush. We'll try to get some more articles out over at Fantasy Boss now that there's actually time to do those sorts of things. But
Unless they decide to make a game on Friday or Wednesday just because.
That's right. We'll do that. Who knows? But please check out r/fantasy MLS. Head over to the MLS Fantasy Boss Discord chat. There's lots of great conversation going on and great people to just interact with right there for thoughts and ideas, and Rate My Team as well. Discord has some great Rate My Team discussions and players just thrown out all the time, and there is a dedicated thread at r/fantasy MLS. Also hit us up on Twitter, Mike, Blaine, and I. We love to interact with people. I love to hear the scores and the reports, successes and failures. I love to just share those moments with everybody. And don't forget, let's get fantasy on Extra Time. So hit up the guys at Extra Time, either at Extra Time or at Weeby or at Empire Goss. Maybe not Overflow Charlie, because he's kind of new to this whole thing, so we don't need to bother Charlie. But definitely David and Andrew. And just let's send them your fantasy questions. Let's try to get one fantasy comment on Extra Time this week if we can, or next week, whatever. But thank you so much for listening to us, everyone, tonight, and good luck.